So you have a dust issue. And either you don't want to spend $1 million on a massive dust collection system, or you just work out of a small shop and you just don't have the room for it. That's where this comes in. This goes on top of a 5-gallon bucket that's hooked up to your shop vac, and then all of the dust being sucked into the vacuum gets trapped in that 5-gallon bucket and doesn't have a chance to make it to the filter on your shop vac. When I was researching this, I came across a video by John Builds It, and I really liked his design. He uses the Dustopper with a Ridgid vacuum, which the Ridgid vacuum is what it's intended for. And it's a really good, neat, tidy system. It's really small and compact, so it's not going to overtake your entire shop. You can just kind of leave it in the corner and then roll it around when you need it. So I'm using a Heart shop vac, and the design that comes in the Dustopper, the one that John Builds It uses, is meant for a Ridgid vacuum. So it is a little bit trickier if you have a different shop vac other than Ridgid, but you can definitely do it, and I'll show you in this video how I got around it. I'm Clayton, the Weekend Builder. Let's get into it. All right, first let's break down the parts. The main components of this build are going to be, first, a shop vac. It doesn't have to be a specific brand minus Heart. Got it at Walmart because it was pretty cheap. Works super well though. This is a 10-gallon capacity shop vac, and then you're going to need a 5-gallon bucket. Again, doesn't matter where it's from. And last but not least, you'll need the Dustopper. You can get this at Home Depot for about $30, and I've heard really good things about it. So I hope it works out super well. Obviously I haven't built it yet, so I don't know. If it sucks, I'll let you know. So it's really not expensive. It's only going to be about 50, 60 bucks to create this whole dust collection apparatus here. And then as far as materials go, first thing you're going to need a 10-foot piece of PVC or ABS. I chose ABS because it was just a lot cheaper. I don't know what was going on at Home Depot. These couplings and these fittings are also super expensive right now. I was expecting them to be way cheaper. And we'll also need some 3/4 inch plywood. This is just a scrap that I have. You can also go to Home Depot and get a 2-foot by 4-foot sheet of plywood for about 20 bucks. And then you'll need the connections, and you're going to need 4 end caps and 4 1.5-inch couplings. The dust collection system that John made from John Builds It has 2-inch pipe that reduces to 1.5 inch and then goes up to the top, and that has a really nice fit in here as well. But that reducer was like $5, and it would have cost an extra 20 bucks just to get all of those reducers. And I found that these couplings fit perfectly in here as well with very minimal play. So I'm just going to use these 1.5-inch couplings, and then I'll drop that 1.5-inch pipe, ABS pipe, and then drop it right in there. And in all 4 legs, that should be pretty strong. So essentially, that's what the assembly is going to be. We will cut our 1.5-inch ABS pipe, and then we will insert it into the coupling, drop that down in there so it's seated all the way down, and then we will put an end cap. In the top of the end cap, we'll have a bolt that attaches it to the plywood top. You're probably wondering, why am I using half ABS, half PVC? Honestly, it's just because I grabbed what was cheapest. I'm not using this for plumbing purposes. It's not even going to be glued together. So as long as it has a nice firm friction grip, it doesn't matter if you get PVC, ABS. So just grab what's cheapest. All right, so the first thing to do is cut the ABS. Let's get started.
Step 1 in this process is cutting the ABS to size. So I first mark how long I want the leg to be, and then I can cut that on the miter saw. Now I advise to use referential measurement wherever possible. That means instead of using a tape measure to mark for all your cuts, you use one piece as a reference point and use that to mark the rest. But it is important to use the same piece to mark everything else. If you're constantly grabbing a new piece to mark, over time it can get slightly off. Now that I have those pieces cut, I flip the shop vac over and measure the distance between the legs. What this is telling me is essentially how big of a piece I need to cut. Then I can mark it and use my track saw to cut it down. If there is one tool in my shop that I recommend, it is this Kreg track saw jig. It is incredible. It's only $69. It's available at almost all Lowe's locations, and it works flawlessly. You just hook it up to your own circular saw and you're good to go. Now I need to mark exactly where to drill holes to attach this to the plywood. So I pop off all of the casters. Now when I flip it over, it's going to sit flat on the plywood. And it was about this time that I realized that I really cut it too big because I was actually measuring the diagonal. So I first use a hammer and a nail to mark exactly where I need to drill those holes, where the center of the casters are. And then I go and I cut it down to a better size. So I shaved off a few inches of each side with my track saw to bring it down to a more manageable size. And then I rounded all the corners with my jigsaw. Now, my jigsaw does not leave a very nice finish, so I brought it over to the disc sander to flatten that edge profile. Next, we need to cut a hole in the plywood for this 5-gallon bucket to nest in. I first trace a line around the outside of the bucket, and then I come back and draw a secondary line about 1/4 of an inch in from that line. I'm going to cut on this inside line, and that's going to leave a little bit of an edge all the way around the circle. That way, the 5-gallon bucket will have that ledge to sit on. And I'll show you right here how this fits in. It's nice and snug. Next, I could drill all of my holes, and I'm just going around and drilling right through those nail divots that I made earlier. Then I do the same thing with all 4 of my end caps by drilling a hole in the top. I decided to use my trim router to give this whole piece a round over. Is this necessary? No. But since I had it, I figured why not? It'll be perfectly functional without this. Then I gave it a quick sanding at 120 grit. So now with all the parts cut, I figured, hey, let's assemble this and see how it all fits together. I'm sure by now that you've already spotted the issue here.
Remember when I said that the couplings were a nice snug fit and that it would be enough for it to be sturdy? May have overestimated it a little bit. When I put everything together, it was pretty wobbly. Now the other people that have made this have gone from a 2-inch pipe with the reducer down to a 1.5-inch pipe, and that allows it to go around the sides here because it actually tapers out. And that's why you can't just have 2-inch pipe running the whole way up. And so I just figured I could just run 1.5-inch, but no, you have to do the 2-inch and reduce it down to 1.5. That's kind of the only way it'll be sturdy, I guess. So I went and got this 2-foot section of 6-inch ABS and then the necessary reducers. So do it right the first time, I guess. I tried to cut corners, didn't work.
So with that fiasco behind me, I could now move on to cutting the 2-inch pipe, and I start by setting up a stop block, and then I cut all 4 of my pieces. Now, since I was adding about 4 or 5 inches on the bottom, I had to cut off about 4 or 5 inches from these existing leg pieces. And I did that as well to all 4 legs. So with that, we're actually ready for assembly.
here's the finished product. I had originally planned to paint this plywood black, but honestly, I think it looks fine. I could still do that in the future. I was also gonna paint these end caps black as well, but since they match the shop vac, it actually doesn't look bad. But I'm super impressed. I used it to vacuum the floor up a little bit, and not a speck of dust got into here. All the dust stayed inside the 5-gallon bucket, which is exactly what it's supposed to do, so that's great. My main concern was making sure that it's small enough that I could fit it in here easily and it's not in the way. That's why I made the top so small. I intentionally didn't leave room for any of the attachments to fit up here. In the video I mentioned earlier from John Builds It, he has holes that these attachments can slide into and then stay right on the shop vac. And that's pretty cool because they're really accessible. But I already have a drawer at the very bottom of my tool chest that I keep all of these attachments in. So yeah, I intentionally made this smaller because I wanted it to fit better in my space, and I already had a spot for that. If you want to do that, all you have to do is just make this a little bit bigger, and then you can just jigsaw out some holes and drop those down. I think one of the hardest parts about this project was my shop vac. Just the fact that I don't have a rigid shop vac, so it wasn't designed to work this way. So I had to work around a few different obstacles. First, I had the coupling fiasco, where I thought that I could use a coupling to attach it to the bottom, and it ended up just being super wobbly. So instead, I ran back to the store and went from 2-inch pipe to 1.5 inch with the reducer. And even then, there was still more wobble than I would like. So what I ended up doing was just drilling a tiny pilot hole and driving in a little 1/2 inch screw, just to act as sort of a set screw in each of the legs. And that worked out really well. It's super rigid now, so I'm pleased with that. So if you're gonna do this and you don't have a rigid shop vac, specifically if you have a heart, I'd recommend doing that. It's an easy little fix. So if you're interested in any of the tools I was using, like the trim router or the Kreg AccuCut track saw jig, I'll have a link to those in the description. You can go check those out on Amazon. All right, so that's gonna be a wrap on this one. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I'm Clayton, the Weekend Builder, and I'll catch you in the next one.